Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're navigating into a world that's probably more high stakes than most people realize. Modern maritime security.
Yeah.
You might picture calm oceans, but in 2025, it's actually facing, well, a pretty intense two-front war, both physical and digital. We're talking everything from massive cargo ships right down to, those ultra-luxury super yachts.
It really is a dual threat. You've got the physical risks we often hear about piracy, theft, even conflict spilling over. But the game changer now, it's the sheer scale of cyber warfare hitting the industry. I mean, just look at the bigger picture. Global cybercrime costs, they're expected to blast past, what, USD 10 trillion by 2025? That's huge.
10 trillion, wow.
And that kind of money, that threat, it doesn't just stop at the beach. It's aimed right at the systems keeping global trade afloat.
Right. And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Yeah.
We want to unpack the specifics. What are these hackers actually doing? Where are the physical threats flaring up again? And crucially, how's the industry fighting back? Because the solutions, the tech, the personnel, they sometimes create their own set of tricky legal issues. We've got some great sources. Let's start with the digital side.
Yeah, it's almost unavoidable, isn't it? The more digital we get, the more efficient, sure, but also the more vulnerable. Looking back at 2024, the raw numbers were pretty stark. Over 1,800 vessels targeted in just the first 6 months.
1,800.
In half a year.
Yep. And that broke down to something like 23,400 malware detections and 178 confirmed ransomware attacks just in the maritime space.
So it really is a surge. Clearly, it's way beyond just, basic email scams now. What kind of sophisticated attacks are we seeing? Oh, they're getting much smarter, more evasive, harder to spot. We're seeing a big increase in what are called command and control attacks, or C2. This isn't just a quick smash and grab. C2 gives the attacker persistent access. Think of it like a hidden backdoor they can use long-term to steal data or, mess with things.
A persistent threat. What
Now,
else?
we're also tracking botnet exploits. Hackers are basically hijacking all those connected smart devices, onboard cameras, sensors, whatever, and using them to launch wider attacks.
And I saw AI is being used offensively too, not just for defense.
Absolutely. AI helps attackers make their malware highly targeted and chameleon-like. It can change its signature, dodge normal defenses, but maybe the biggest underlying vulnerability, the one they really exploit, is the fuzzy line between a ship's information technology, the IT, and its operational technology, the OT.
Okay, let's break that down. IT is like crew email, admin stuff, maybe guest Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Payroll, communications, planning.
And OT is the actual running of the ship. Navigation, engines.
Precisely. Propulsion, steering, ballast control, navigation displays, the critical stuff. And the problem is, for cost reasons, for efficiency, these two systems, IT and OT, are increasingly connected, maybe through just one shared gateway or firewall.
So a breach on the IT side, like a bad email attachment.
Exactly. It can potentially hop across that internal boundary and start messing with the OT system. Suddenly, your navigation could be compromised or worse.
And speaking of navigation, the Electronic Chart Display System, ACDIS, seems like a prime target, especially on yachts.
It is. And the scary part is how easy it can be. Take GPS spoofing. This isn't science fiction. Remember that University of Texas experiment back in 2013? They used about, $3,000 worth of equipment to feed fake GPS signals to the Superyacht White Rose of Drax and actually managed to change its course.
$3,000 to hijack a yacht's navigation
Yeah.
remotely. That's accessible.
Worryingly so. And it's not just GPS. The Automatic Identification System, AIS, is another weak point. Hackers can shut it down, or maybe even worse, spoof it. They can inject fake data, make phantom ships appear on screen, or fake buoys, fake lights. Imagine the confusion, the collision risk.
Okay, so with all this digital vulnerability, what are the regulators doing? The IMO stepped in back in 2021, right?
They did, mandating cyber risk management in the ISM code. But you need technical standards too, and that's where the classification societies come in. IACS, the International Association of Classification Societies, brought in UR E26 and E27. These are now mandatory for new ships contracted after July 1st, 2024. They set specific technical requirements for cyber resilience.
And they focus heavily on securing that core network on board, the NMEA 2000.
That's right. The NMEA 2000 network is like the vessel's central nervous system. It connects almost everything. GPS, radar, autopilot, depth sounders, engine monitors.
All talking on the same digital highway, so if something malicious gets plugged in.
It potentially has access to everything. A compromised laptop connected to a gateway, a dodgy sensor. It's a single point of failure, which is why these new IACS rules are so focused on securing it.
And for ships already out there, you mentioned specific defenses, Like Net Protect. What does that do?
Yeah, devices like Net Protect are essentially trying to act like a security guard for that NMEA 2000 network. It's a dedicated box that sits on the network, constantly monitoring traffic 24/7. It's looking for anything unusual devices that shouldn't be there, weird beta patterns, known vulnerabilities at gateways.
Right, it sounds alerts.
Right, real-time alerts if it spots something fishy. The idea is early detection.
But hold on, if the network itself is the vulnerability, doesn't adding another device, even a security one, just create one more thing to potentially attack or bypass?
That's a fair question. The focus of these systems is less on preventing every possible intrusion, which is incredibly hard, and more on detection and enabling isolation. They monitor passively, looking for those telltale signs of a rogue device or bad data. It's about giving the crew or maybe remote security teams via a 4G, 5G link a heads up instantly. So they can then physically unplug something or logically isolate that part of the network before real damage is done, especially before something jumps from IT to OT.
Got it. Detection, not necessarily absolute prevention. Okay, let's shift gears.
Mhm.
From the screens and networks to the actual physical ocean. We hear piracy numbers are down globally since the 90s. Is that the whole story?
Well, overall, reported incidents have dropped since the peak in the mid-90s, that's true. But what we're seeing in 2025 is that the threat hasn't disappeared, it's just become more concentrated and, in some ways, more sophisticated in specific key areas, these maritime choke points.
So where are the 2025 hotspots that sailors really need to worry about?
The Gulf of Guinea, off West Africa, sadly remains the most dangerous region worldwide. The primary threat there is still violent hijacking and, crucially, the kidnapping of crew for ransom. They often exploit gaps in regional security forces.
Still number one. What else?
We're seeing a definite resurgence of threat in the Gulf of Aden region linked to the instability in Yemen. And attacks there are sometimes getting more advanced, reportedly using drones for surveillance before they strike.
Drones. And Southeast Asia, the Malacca and Singapore Straits.
Still a major concern, particularly the Singapore Strait. The pattern there is typically less about holding the ship for ransom and more about opportunistic armed robbery. Quick boardings, often at night or while ships are anchored or slow-moving, grabbing cash, equipment, crew belongings. High volume, lower tech maybe, but still very dangerous.
Okay, so those are the big ship, high seas threats.
Yeah.
But what about, the average person with a sailboat or a motor yacht in a marina? Low-tech theft seems like a constant headache.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge volume problem that doesn't always make headlines. In the U.S. alone, something like 5,000 boats are stolen every year, and certain areas become hotspots. Grenada and St. Martin were flagged in 2024. Thieves often use dinghies to approach quietly, cut mooring lines, or just climb aboard when no one's around.
What are they mostly stealing from smaller boats?
Electronics are definitely a target. Chart, plotters, fish finders, VHF radios, easy to remove, easy to sell. But the real prize, often, is the outboard engine. They're valuable, relatively portable, and command high prices on the black market. That and maybe the tender itself.
So what can boat owners actually do beyond, just lock in the cabin door?
The basics still matter a lot. Good locks on hatches and lockers. Bolt or lock your outboard securely. Never, ever hide a spare key on board. Sounds obvious, but people do it. And take portable electronics with you when you leave the boat. But nowadays, connected tech is really essential.
Like GPS tracking.
Definitely. Real-time GPS tracking with geofence alerts. Set a virtual boundary around your mooring or slip. If the boat moves outside that tiny zone, boom, you get an alert on your phone. Also, you can get anti-theft sensors specifically for outboards or tenders. They connect via Bluetooth to your phone or a hub. If that connection breaks because someone's lifting it off, instant alert.
Smart. And for the bigger yachts and commercial ships, the human element, crew training is basically mandatory, right?
Absolutely non-negotiable. The ISPS code, International Ship and Port Facility Security Code, requires regular, documented security drills. This isn't just box ticking. It's practicing anti-piracy maneuvers, knowing how to use the citadel or safe room, lockdown procedures, emergency comms. Being prepared under pressure makes a massive difference.
Right. Now let's talk about the very top end, super yachts. These aren't just boats. They're symbols of immense wealth, potentially holding sensitive personal or business data. They must be incredibly attractive targets.
Hugely attractive. For theft, espionage, kidnapping, you name it. The security measures reflect that. It's about layers and really sophisticated tech. You see systems like Mars NEDAR. What's really interesting there is the AI and data fusion. It pulls info from radar, radio frequency monitors, high-def cameras, even sonar sometimes.
Sonar. What are they looking for underwater?
Divers, potentially, or even mini-subs. But the AI fuses all that sensor data to create a complete 360-degree security bubble around the yacht. A major focus now is COAS counter-unmanned aerial systems, detecting and potentially deterring drones used for spying on guests or planning an attack.
A protective bubble. And what about physical defenses on board? You mentioned citadels.
Yes, the Citadel or Safe Room. It's a hardened space, often with ballistic protection, independent air supply, separate communications, a last resort if boarders get through other defenses. And you also see things like acoustic deterrence, LRA devices that emit focused, extremely loud, pain-inducing sound beams to warn off approaching boats, especially at night. Non-lethal, but very persuasive.
Which brings us to maybe the most controversial defense. Armed guards. Privately contracted armed security personnel, PCASP. The stats seem clear. Ships with armed guards don't get taken by pirates. But there's still huge debate. Why?
Well, the core tension is escalation risk. While they are undeniably effective as a deterrent, putting guns into the situation inherently raises the stakes. Organizations like World Sailing actively advise against carrying firearms on yachts precisely because a confrontation could turn violent much more quickly, potentially leading to injuries or deaths, even if the initial intent was just robbery.
Okay, so if an owner decides the risk does warrant armed guards, what kind of logistical and legal hoops do they have to jump through? It sounds complicated.
It's incredibly complicated. Often, the logistics are a bigger challenge than the actual security operation. First hurdle, flag state compliance. You need explicit permission from the country where the vessel is registered. That means submitting detailed voyage plans, crew lists, specifics about the weapons and personnel. It's a mountain of paperwork, and approval isn't guaranteed. Some flag states are much stricter than others. Malta, for example, has very defined procedures.
And then there's the issue of who's actually in charge on board. The master's liability.
This is huge. The ship's master, the captain, has ultimate command and control over everyone on board, including the armed security team. They are legally responsible for any use of force by those guards, even if the incident happens when the master is off watch, asleep in their cabin.
Wow. So the captain, who isn't a trained firearms expert necessarily, carries the can if the security team makes a mistake.
Exactly. If the guards misuse force, make a bad call, injure someone unlawfully, the liability, potentially criminal and civil, falls heavily on the master and the ship owner. That's why the vetting process for PMSCs, the private security companies, is so critical. But the ultimate responsibility stays with the vessel's command.
That whole process, getting permissions, moving weapons legally through different countries' waters and ports, sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Which led to this kind of gray area solution. Floating armories or FAs? Explain those.
Right. Floating armories are basically ships that are used by these private maritime security companies, PMSCs, purely for storing weapons and ammunition offshore. They exist almost entirely to bypass the complex, expensive, and time-consuming laws of coastal states and ports regarding bringing weapons into their territory or territorial waters.
So they hang out just outside the 12-mile limit.
Precisely. They operate in international waters outside national jurisdiction. This allows the security teams, the PCASP, to embark or disembark, pick up or drop off their equipment without triggering all the port state controls, customs declarations, and fees associated with moving firearms internationally.
But legally, what are they?
Yeah.
They're full of weapons, but operating in a sort of legal no man's land.
That's the crux of it. Currently, FAs have no specific recognized legal status as floating arms depots under international law. Legally, they're typically just treated as ordinary merchant ships. They have to comply with laws like UNCLOs regarding navigation rights like innocent passage. But their core function, storing arms offshore for PMSCs, exists in a kind of legal vacuum, constrained by various international arms control ideas, but not directly regulated as armories.
Fascinating. A real workaround born from necessity and, well, legal ambiguity. So we've covered a lot, from AI hackers to floating gun lockers.
I think the main takeaway for you listening is that securing assets at sea in 2025 really demands a joined-up approach. It has to be holistic. You need the tech, the cyber defenses, the sensors, staying compliant with rules like URE26, but you absolutely have to pair that with the human element. Good training, constant vigilance, situational awareness, and really careful vetting if you're bringing in outside security.
A great summary. Tech and people working together. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to navigation, the very foundation of moving around on the water, and leave you with a final thought. We've talked about spoofing high-tech GPS, defending digital charts.
Hmm.
But the actual data underpinning all of it, it's often shockingly old.
Yeah, this is the sort of elephant in the room for maritime safety and security. It's estimated that less than 10% of the world's oceans have actually been surveyed using modern methods.
10%. Think about that. Even in busy waters, say off parts of the U.S. coast, the digital charts your fancy plotter uses might still rely on depth soundings taken with lead lines or wire drags, sometimes before 1940.
It's kind of mind-boggling. This massive data gap is a fundamental vulnerability, older and maybe even more profound than any cyber threat we discussed. How can you navigate safely or securely if you don't truly know what's beneath you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leads to this quiet revolution that's happening now.
Crowdsourced bathymetry. Basically getting regular vessels, yachts, fishing boats, commercial ships equipped with sensors to constantly collect depth data as they go about their business. It's like a hydrographic version of Waze or TripAdvisor, using thousands of inputs to gradually fill in those enormous gaps in our knowledge of the seabed.
So the cutting edge of 2025 security, in a way,
Mm.
relies on fixing data collection methods from the 1940s, using the power of the crowd. Something to think about. We'll leave it there for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.